Okay, so in this video, we'll be looking at overriding the default login behavior in Filament-based applications. And you might have some use cases where you need to implement something like this. Like there could be a use case where you need to log in the user with username instead of the email. Or let's say you want to log the activity of the user that they have logged in, or you want to trigger an event after the login. So yeah, there could be multiple use cases, and by default, we can't really do that because Filament doesn't really offer much flexibility regarding the login flow. But yeah, we can dive into the source code and look into the implementation of the Filament login flow, and based on that, we can override the default behavior. So yeah, in this case, what we will be doing is instead of logging the user with the email address, we will be adding a feature to let the user log in with the username. So yeah, instead of email address, we'll be adding the login flow to let the user log in with the username. So yeah, let's open up our VS Code, and to properly understand this flow, we need to look into the current implementation, and then based on that, we will be implementing our own flow. So yeah, I have opened the admin panel provider, and based on the panel that you want to work on, like in this case, I want to override the default login behavior of the admin panel. So based on the panel that you want to override, you can look into the respective panel. So in this case, we want to override the behavior of the admin panel. So for that reason, we have opened up the admin panel provider, and in that panel provider, there's this login method defined and nothing is passed to this. So yeah, only the login method is defined, which indicates that the login feature is implemented. And if we go ahead and look into the underlying implementation of this, then as you can see, this is the hasAuth trait, and there's this login method passed. And inside this login method, this can either receive a type of string or closure or an array or an action, which is a type of login class. And if we go ahead and look into it, then as you can see, this is a simple page with additional features implemented here, like interacts with forms and with rate limiting. So yeah, we need this because the user might repetitively try to log in into our system. So yeah, we need to implement the rate limiting feature as well. And yeah, since this is a livewire component, so yeah, the livewire goodies are also implemented here, like the mount method. So on here, this is basically checking if the user is authenticated, and if it is, then it will just redirect to the intended URL. Otherwise, it will just reset the form. And on the authenticate method, so this is the method where the authentication related stuff is happening. So first it will try to rate limit, and if the user makes a lot of login attempts, that is the failed login attempts, then it will just throw this too many requests exception. And if it does not throw that error, then further block of code will be executed, like it will grab the current state of the form and then try to log the user in with this filament auth attempt, and it will pass the credentials from data. So this method is basically passing the email and the password, and then based on these two values, it will try to authenticate the user. And along with that, it is also passing the remember me field, as you can see. Okay, let's open that up. So along with the data, that is the email and the password, it is also passing the remember me. And if it fails to attempt the login, then it will just throw this failure validation exception. Otherwise, it will grab the authenticated user, and if the user is an instance of Filament user, and if they cannot access the panel, so yeah, we need to look into that as well. If they cannot access the panel, then it will just log out the user and then throw the error again, validation exception again. And finally, if there's no any exceptions thrown, then it will just go ahead and regenerate the session and finally return the login response. So yeah, this is the whole flow. And there are other stuff implemented in here as well, like throwing the validation exception or returning the current form. or on the get forms method, as you can see, this is passing the email form component, the password form component, and the get remember form component. So these three are the fields that we currently see when we try to log in. And then these methods are further implemented. So for the email form component, this is basically passing the email component. For the password as well, this is passing the password. And for the remember me as well. And if the register option is implemented, then this will also show a register action on the login page. And we can even go ahead and override the title and the description. And yeah, the form action I think is deprecated, I'm not sure. So this is the get authenticated form action, which will basically let the user submit the form. So where the authenticate method will be called when the user clicks on the sign in button. So yeah, this is the form that is responsible for doing that. And yeah, finally we have the credentials from form data, which will basically return the current state of the email and the password. So yeah, this is the whole flow. And if you want to override any default behavior, then you can just go ahead and define a new login class and then override this default login class. And based on your needs, you can go ahead and add in more features to this. Like, let's say if you want to add a login activity after the user logs in, then you can go ahead and override this authenticate method. And somewhere in here, once the user logs in successfully, you can go ahead and perform actions in here. So yeah, this is the whole flow. And in this case, I think I've mentioned it already, we will be overriding the default behavior by letting the user sign in with the username instead of the email. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So I'll just fold all of the folders, and inside our app filament namespace, I'll create a new folder called pages. Inside that, I'll create a new folder again called auth, and inside that, I'll create a new class called login.php. Let's go ahead and define this class now. Let's pass the namespace of app. Okay, let's see. App filament pages auth. So yeah, let's pass that pages and then auth. Let's define the body of this class. Login is going to extend the filament pages auth login. And if we go ahead and look into it, okay, this is the class that we'll be overriding. And here we'll just go ahead and override the, okay, let's see, we don't need to override this authenticate method in this case. And we have the form inside this forms. Okay, I'll just go ahead and override this get forms. And yeah, I'll also copy this get email form component, and we'll just make the necessary changes in these two methods. So yeah, let's go ahead and paste that in here. And instead of get email, I'll override this with username, since this is going to pass the username. And let's import this component from filament support. Okay, filament forms component, because this is going to pass a type of form. Let's import the text input as well. And instead of email, this is going to pass the username. The label is going to be username. So let's pass that. And we don't need the type of email, so I'll just remove it, and everything else looks good. So yeah, that's done. And instead of email, this is going to pass the username. And yeah, the ID completion is also working fine. And one more thing that we need to override here is the get form data from component or something of that kind. Yeah, the get credentials from data, we need to override this. Instead of passing the email, we need to pass the username. So I'll just go ahead and override that as well. Let's paste that in here. Instead of email, we are going to pass the username. And the key in this case is this key. So yeah, this is the one that is being referenced in here. Let's save this. And now on our admin panel provider, instead of the default login class, that is this login class, we can pass our own login class. So let's go ahead and pass that. Let's pass the login class that we defined ourselves. So I'll just go ahead and import that from the Filament Pages Auth login or app Filament Pages Auth login. So yeah, this is the class that we implemented ourselves. And if we go ahead and look into it, then yeah, this is the class that we just implemented. So yeah, let's save this. And one more thing that I want to mention in here is behind the scenes, I just went ahead and added the username column in our users table. So I'll just open that migration file, add username field to users table. So yeah, I just added this username field on our users table. And if I open that in my browser, so I'll try to open phpMyAdmin in here. Let's log in. Okay, I'll just open the users table, and as you can see, okay, we don't have that in here. Yeah, as you can see, we have this username column with the value of admin. So yeah, this is the username. Let's now go ahead and give this a try. Let's open up our project. Let's reload, and as you can see, we have the username instead of the email. So let's pass the username and the password, and if everything is implemented properly, then we should be able to log in. So yeah, let's go ahead and click on sign in, and now as you can see, we are logged in. So yeah, we have finally changed the default login behavior of Filament PHP. And yeah, I hope that this was helpful. So yeah, that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.